Little known fact about me, I love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. More than any other franchise by a landslide. My love and adoration only being rivaled by Halo, for instance. However, on the other side of that coin, I really didn't like Mutant Mayhem. The Turtles didn't really feel much like the Turtles. It felt too much like the 80s show. Their reworked origin was flat out stupid, was never compelled or really liked the villains. I didn't like how Baxter Stockman was killed in the first 5 minutes, but, all that's for another topic, for another video. Don't get me wrong, I still love the 80s show. I watch the VHS tapes of it too, but generally, I'm always going to prefer the more gritty series and adaptions, like The Last Ronin, the 90s movie, 2003, or all the way to the basics of Mirage, etc., etc. So, when I find out about this series, initially, I really didn't care. I mean, a TMNT series based on my least favorite TMNT verse, why would I care? I was obviously always going to watch it. If I could inject the 4 green Daredevils directly into my bloodstream, I would. But my interests were slightly piqued by the inclusion of Bishop. Generally, Bishop in my eyes is a top 5 Turtles villain, and seeing him here, I was interested. But it'd be very generous to say I did not enjoy the series. I was by no means disappointed, but I wasn't anticipating being surprised by a sudden boost in quality. But, however, I told myself if this was, in my eyes, bad, I'd review it in some regard, so therefore, here we are. If there's anything I can praise, and believe me, there's really not much, it's the animation. This series takes notes and stylistic choices from Rise of TMNT, while still adapting the hand-drawn art style of the movie, which was one of the few things in the movie I really did like. The animation is stunning, and when the fight scenes are actually well choreographed, I think the show is pretty cool. Admittedly, the villains are very inconsistent, and the adapted villains are downright bad in my opinion. So, for instance, let's start with Bishop. Bishop is traditionally a white male government agent who hunts aliens after they experimented on him. He's a dedicated, intimidating, and threatening villain. In this show, Bishop is barely identifiably the same person. They race and gender swapped Bishop, so now he's a Latina, not to mention with a completely different origin. Instead of being a government agent that went through a horribly traumatic event, she is a robotics engineer that had her life's work destroyed by Super Duper Fly in Mutant Mayhem, and now she wants revenge. Are we serious right now? This character is Bishop in name only. Also, side note, Mutant Mayhem gets away with a lot of changes to the lore, and we kinda just let it happen. Like, Leatherhead is also gender swapped and changed completely, which I personally find is pretty stupid. And April's race swapped too, and generally this just feels odd. At what point is this still TMNT and not just whatever the fuck Joe Rogan wanted to make? These changes would upset me significantly less if Bishop now was at least competent. But I never felt she or her robots were a real threat. The Turtles only ever struggled due to their own incompetence. And when Bishop does go fist to show with the Turtles, her robots turn on her? I mean, credit to the writers, I guess. I can't recall a robot invasion in this franchise before. But also relegating Bishop and their usual arc to this feels bizarre. And what I believe to be the end-all be-all when it comes to supporting character arcs in the 2003 series, it took a literal century for Bishop to become not racist to anything that's not a human. But in this series, it took 1 night? On top of that, her sidekick, I guess you could call it, Rod, was so fucking insufferable and irritable every time he was on screen. I was just annoyed by him. I thought they were going to turn him into Slash or maybe Mutagen Man, but instead we got Pigeon Pete from it, which as a hardcore fan just feels like dangling keys in front of my face. Then you have the other adapted villain, the Purple Dragons. In most iterations, the Purple Dragons are a very notorious street gang in the lore of TMNT that is usually led by Hun. And Lord Jesus, does this Hun suck! In most other interpretations, Hun is imposing, he's powerful, he's intimidating. That even makes the Turtles struggle a lot of the time. Show definitely changed him. He's now kind of like a PETA activist. He's sort of like a pacifist who actively teams up with the Turtles when their interests are aligned. He's honestly a bit of a loser too. He's written super insecure, which is never the vibe you get from him in his other prominent appearances. In 2003, he was beating on Casey and taking on the Turtles. 2012 wasn't as strong as 2003, but he's still, regardless, a threatening opponent. He was pushing around Casey and was an actual serious threat, unlike this doofus. This guy's just a goober. He's got to use a brick to fight anyone. He's got to be provoked beyond belief. He's written as someone who would sacrifice his whole gang for 3 chickens. And in general, he was never an interesting or compelling antagonist in the series. And then there's Angela, but her character is as deep as a kiddie pool. Hun's the only one with an actual personality, and that's cool, but this is such a lame adaptation of one of TMNT's best villains. The East River 3 are 3 brand new villains to TMNT. Never before seen characters, and honestly, they're pretty not good. There's 3, obviously. Lee the Eel, and they make an unfunny joke about her name every 5 seconds she's on screen. Then Mustang Sally, who's the only one I found actually entertaining, especially in episode 11. Then Goldfin, who's the only one who's an actual villain. Everyone else is just, kind of there. Goldfin is handedly the best villain in the show. Goldfin is shown to be the brains of the operation of the East River 3, and is the only one who's really a threat. Sally and Lee just want acceptance. Goldfin is a straight-up villain, and thank God for that. Regardless of my thoughts of introducing a new villain to TMNT like this, kudos to him for actually being a villain and staying that way. Many times throughout this universe so far, they have the antagonist who just becomes a good guy or temporary ally, and that seems to be a clear cycle of repetition. In this universe, in Mutant Mayhem, hey guys, let's not kill everyone on Earth. In episode 4, Donnie hacks one of the robots and turns him into Metalhead. Episode 6, Bishop realizes, oh shit, murder bots aren't very cool and they're going Terminator? Let's take them out. Episode 12, oh, the obvious bad guy's a bad guy. Well, I guess you turtles ain't so bad. Let's go blow him up. But regardless, thank God Goldfin actually maintains his villain status. All in all, the villains are just repetitive and poorly adapted. Goldfin is the only one I even really consider to be a villain. Bishop is Bishop only in name, and that also goes for the Purple Dragons. I respect them for attempting to do something new, but when you have truly incredible villains and you elect not to use them, it's irritable to say the least. They should have been a one-off villain that's not too common to see. That works better since it's not taken away from actual interesting and impactful villains in this universe. Another major talking point that I'm seeing, and I personally agree with, is the comedy in this show just doesn't hit, and it really doesn't. A lot of the jokes aren't very funny, and most of the jokes don't land. I found myself laughing maybe 1 to 3 times every episode, and there was probably a good 20 jokes per episode, and that gives you a pretty good idea on how unfunny it is. And my sense of humor isn't exactly hard to impress. So, really, I can agree with a lot of critics in that regard of, it's not funny. It really isn't. The second arc, in my eyes, is arguably the worst TMNT story ever told, especially in animation. The East River 3 have an arc, it's so poorly plotted, poorly written, and poorly paced, it's actually laughable. Initially, the arc just confused me because it's shown April needs a story for her school project, and Splinter is speaking in Vermin the whole time so she can't even use it. So Raph offers the dub over it, and it's implied that he made all this up, so for all intents and purposes, none of this even happened. It's just kind of something Raph lied about. It's like Fight Club, but not good. And also, this takes away all stakes because it inadvertently tells us everyone is fine and nothing bad happened. Also, there's many scenes that are flashbacks to the East River 3's origin, and there's no way the Turtles could have saw that, and we see it. So how does that work if this is retelling the story? Generally, everything in this arc makes very little sense. The first arc is so much better than the second, and there's actual good I can say about it. I like how it reveals more of what happened over time. I enjoy seeing the different perspectives it shows. But outside of that, most characters seem like incompetent idiots like Leo or Raph, for instance. Then episode 6 happens, and god, that sucked. Why does Bishop send 4 robots to kill the Turtles when she has an army? Why not just send all of them and say, hey, go kill some mutants, guys? Wouldn't that solve all of her problems? Why is it that in every other fight with the Mechazoids, the Turtles have the fighting prowess of a 5-year-old, except for now, and Mikey just being the exception. He was weirdly competent at it his first go-around. The problem both arcs exhibit is that there's a feeling that the win wasn't deserved. It always feels like they got lucky and not that they figured the problem out, and that's increasingly annoying. None of these victories are earned. Please, for the love of God, make the sequel to Mutant Mayhem feel earned. Make Shredder feel like an imposing threat that takes real skill to beat. I'm tired of these dopey ass turtles winning by a chance of a Deus Ex Machina. It's getting old and tired. For being a review on a Turtles-based product, I haven't really spoken about them, only everything surrounding them. And generally that's because I don't really like any of them. And that was clear in the movie, but in the show, I liked them even less. In Mutant Mayhem, I really disliked how the Turtles were heroes for the sake of popularity. In something like 2012 Arise, they were heroes because it was the right thing to do. In 2012, Krang tried to destroy or take over NYC many times, and every time, the Turtles stopped them. Hell, in 2012, they never even revealed themselves to the public. They stayed in the shadows through all 5 seasons. And they were still heroes. Or in Rise, they saved the world 2-3 times because it was the right thing to do. In this universe, it seems they need a reason other than it's the right thing to do. And in my opinion, that makes it hard for me to really enjoy them as heroes. The Turtles are taught honor, and that honor and heroism should shine through. Teenagers are not. And if you want to say, oh, but they're teenagers, they wouldn't care about that. Well, that entire concept is defeated by the existence of characters like Ben 10, who are snotty little shitheads, but still do the right thing because they're heroes. So, it's only fair we start from the top, so leading with Leo. This show really demonstrated that I dislike this version of Leo. Now, I do enjoy Leo. 2003 Leo, for instance, was so cool. He had aura. I appreciated 2012 for giving him more depth in his personality, and I appreciated Rise for showcasing another side to his character. That show had the what if Leo wasn't the leader, and it shows how different he could be. And in this, he's just a caricature of 2003, except an anxious wreck who's scared of his own shadow. And it generally is on the annoying behalf of his iterations. Leo's character is the leader, and a character like Leo, who's a leader separated from Steam, is always going to weaken the character. Except in those previous shows, Leo had arcs on what if he was separated. In 2003, he had an arc where he had to go far away to train to relearn his school and had to be separated from his family. That worked since he was an incompetent idiot without his brothers. Mikey is by far the most enjoyable turtle for me personally. He's scatterbrained but a competent fighter. He's the best at improv and has the most natural talent. That is on perfect demonstration in episode 2 when he's forced to improvise. I do think him having an arc on learning how to improvise is really stupid, but I won't hold it against him. In fact, I think he has some of the better one-on-one fights in the show. The bathroom fight in episode 2 is probably one of my favorites in the show. It's definitely better choreographed than most as well. And he actually wins without stupid Deus Ex Machina excuses to save him. Regardless of my thoughts on the show, the writers can write Mikey at the very least. Also, I like how Mikey's the only turtle who's responsible, instead of a flaming idiot for the entire season. I'll lead this by saying I really dislike this VA for Raph. I like Raph to be a heavily New York accented individual who can fight anyone he needs to. In this series, he's shockingly the most incompetent, even though he's usually the most naturally combat able. Like, he's defeated by a slightly above average pacifist with a brick. This generally just feels like a caricature of the angry one as Raph, rather than the many facets of his character that can and should be explored. I really enjoyed Donnie's first episode. Comparative to the rest of the series, at least it was playing into his strengths of technology. It was nice to see in general. It seems everyone in the show could get Mikey and Don, but not Raph or Leo right. I enjoyed his 16 opening bit scene as well. It was a highlight of the episode, if anything. The train fight was great too. Him making Metalhead was reminiscent of 2012, which I'm never going to complain about. I only speak about his first because his second and the second arc was a lot closer to a Wingnut / Leatherhead episode, which is irritable to say the least. Everything considered, this might be my least favorite version of the Four Brothers, and the writing in this series doesn't help. I generally hope in later seasons this universe addresses this and adds more depth. These episodes felt devoid of character in Leo and Raph's cases, but brimming with character in Donnie and Mikey's episodes. Their characters just felt inconsistent to me. I think splitting the four brothers up was generally really stupid. I understand why it was done, to give the turtles each individual episodes to shine, but separation was unneeded. Outside of our villains and four turtles, the mutants are majorly lacking, but I'm not surprised. Splinter isn't a character, he's a device for stories to occur. His first appearances in episodes 1 to 6, he's voiced by Fred Tatasciore, which was shocking to find out, but I'm not complaining. The rest of Season 1 and Arc 2 is narrated by someone completely else, but I find it somewhat funny they couldn't get Jackie Chan back, so they just wrote excuses for it not to be Jackie Chan. April is here, she has several appearances, but frankly, I'm not a fan of her in this or in the movie. She feels so bland. She's Reporter April, which is just flat out annoying sometimes, and High School April, which means High School Casey, which I don't like. 2012 didn't do it right, though Rise did, so we'll give her a shot. I hope we'll see her play the scientist role again, eventually. I always found that a lot more compelling. So far, this universe has weak characters, especially by TMNT standards. If you go back to the days of 2003, 2012, or Rise, by episode 12 you had a good handle and understanding of the characters. You understood April, you understood the Turtles, hell we even had Casey by episode 12 and 03. And the characters were all well established, and after a movie and a 12-episode TV show, I feel like I don't understand these characters. They still feel bland and uninteresting. Most of them at least. There's a definite exceptions, but generally I find them to be disappointing. Generally speaking, I didn't enjoy this show. I found the episodes to be generally unfunny but filled with jokes. The James Gunn without James Gunn effect. I found the characters annoying. There was good moments spread between, but it never helped with the inconsistencies that the show maintained. The only saving graces are the animation and half the turtles. Besides those two things, the show was mostly just irritable and annoying. By the end, I was excited to be done. The villains weren't enjoyable either. Even as someone who really disliked Mutant Mayhem, I found this to be a major downgrade. You know, TMNT is really cool, so subscribe and like please. Check my music out too, YouTube and SoundCloud links in the description. This is my first attempt at this kind of thing, so I hope it came out good. Yeah.